Hi everyone, it's that time of the week. It's Futures Friday where I get to go through this week's science and technology news. Now I've actually got a little bit of extra stuff for you, so we're going literally back in time a little bit more than we usually do here to the 6th of July, as you see. So if you want to understand what the latest science and technology breakthroughs are, then simply head to fanaticalfuturist.com or 311institute.com and you can read about all of these things there. Now, the first one that we've got is we've actually got GPT-3. So GPT-3 is now helping accelerate chemical research. Now, what we mean by that is increasingly artificial intelligence is actually being used to create new synthetic compounds, new synthetic chemicals, new synthetic materials, and so on and so forth. But it's doing it about 1 million times faster than we lazy humans used to do. This particular piece of news here, this isn't the first time that the United States have deployed a drone fleet for the Navy. So in this particular case, they're now starting to dispatch semi-autonomous and fully autonomous naval vessels. So these take the form of minesweepers, but also harbour surveillance craft, those kinds of things that are fully autonomous, to Japan. Now, that's obviously a South China Sea issue, which we're not going to get into that because, frankly, that's politics and to that. Now, something I've been talking about for a very long time, but see, when we have a look at cyber, the number of cyber attacks that we see globally has been increasing about 125% year on year. We are now at the point where we see fully autonomous cyber weapons being deployed, ironically by researchers rather than criminals, but that's going to come soon. So as we see the number of cyber attacks increase almost exponentially, with companies like JP Morgan trying to fend off 45 billion attacks a day, Siemens, who I'm actually going to be sitting down with in September in Davos, have developed a semi to fully autonomous cyber defense platform for CNI, so critical national infrastructure. Now, this is actually the second time I've seen this. One of the first examples was with Darktrace, which is now valued at $5.3 billion. And been taken private. Now, with this particular platform, Siemens platform uses artificial intelligence to detect incoming threats, try to analyze and assess what those cyber threats are, and then autonomously make the decision on what to do to counter them. So the important thing here is this is human out of the loop as opposed to human on or in the loop, as the US military calls the loops. Now, we've also got this one here. This is actually quite interesting. So a little while ago, Neuralink, which is a brain-machine interface outfit, ostensibly more in healthcare, but Elon Musk actually is trying to use brain-machine interfaces to help accelerate the eventual arrival of human telepathy. That's a whole thing. We've done that already, but I'm not going to get into that here. In this particular case, the patient involved in this study was a quadriplegic, and he's now playing games, he's now writing letters and all kinds of things using his brain chip, but he's actually doing them all simultaneously, which kind of gets us on to the conversation of, what really happens when all we need to do is use our thoughts to control all of the different objects and things around us. That's it. Just how much could we get done? Could you get through all of your emails in a couple of days, for example? No. Now, DISA, moving on to other things, cyber again. So DISA, basically, which is essentially the cyber defense arm of the US military, wants to automate 75% of its responses as quickly as possible. Now, they admit that they are way, way behind target, but actually this also ties into an older story that I wrote about 2 to 3 years ago on the NSA, where the NSA want to actually automate 75% of their spies. So on the cyber front, you're kind of starting to get a theme here. The future of cyber is increasingly automated and autonomous, and there are distinctions there. Automated is if this happens, do that. Autonomous is essentially where the machines start intelligently making the decision on what to do in a particular circumstance. Now, talking about AI, we think ChatGPT and a lot of the large language models are fairly powerful today. They're very good at language, but they're not much good at anything else other than synthetic chemistry, as I just pointed out. And NVIDIA's CEO actually thinks that in the next 10 years, AIs, or the AIs that we have today, will be 1,000,000 times more performant. Now, if you think about that, if you make something 2 times, 3 times, 4 times better, that's quite a leap. 1,000,000-fold improvement is crazy. But actually, in the past 10 years, we've actually seen 1,000,000-fold improvement in the performance of artificial intelligences. So he's actually basing his future view on his historic view there. Now, what else have we got? Congratulations to the United States for finally fielding a Mach 5 hypersonic weapon that didn't crash into the sea, burn or fail. This little story is a sort of long-running story of mine, because when we actually have a look at what we call military overmatch between the United States, NATO, Russia, China, as well as lots of other countries around the world, the US has been historically bad at creating anything that flies faster than Mach 1. So the US actually having a successful hypersonic weapons test is insane. And it does mean that they are finally starting to catch up with China and Russia. However, in China's case, did you know China are actually already trying to develop hypersonic drones and hypersonic drone swarms? That's it. So while the US think they're getting ahead, they're actually not. Then furthermore, Russia and China have also been trying to develop supersonic submarines and torpedoes, I kid you not, using supercavitation technologies. We can talk about that all you like, whenever. Now, we've also got this one. So DARPA announces first of a kind project to allow real-time drug approvals. Now, a little while ago, basically, about 4 or 5 years ago, I started talking about the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and Web3 technologies to create automated or semi-autonomous regulators in the financial services world. So this is especially the UK's FCA and Japan. Now, in this particular situation, DARPA's Equip project is trying to do the same for drug discovery. So today, basically, we live in a world where artificial intelligence can create new drugs at speed. So we can create vaccines in 7 minutes. In silico's artificial intelligence developed 30,000 new drugs in 21 days. So we're getting to the point where we can snap our fingers and create a new kind of drug treatment. However, it can still take 1, 2, 3 years to get that drug through trials and approved by the regulators. So using a combination of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, real-world simulations, and so on and so forth, let alone quantum tech, which is coming through, DARPA basically want to get to the point where they can use AI to create a new drug treatment for something more in the military space. So think biological or chemical warfare stuff, pandemics, that sort of stuff. And then create a new treatment for those things, and then have the FDA almost autonomously approve them in real time. This, if it is successful, will be a massive change to the global healthcare system. Now, Airbus have been surveying 100 airports. Now, what I mean by surveying is they've been scanning them, basically. But you might ask, why are Airbus scanning 100 airports around the world? And it's to create better, fully autonomous commercial aircraft. So about 3 years ago, Airbus in Charles de Gaulle Airport in France tested their first fully autonomous A320neo aircraft. There's a link to that in this particular article. You can go and have a look at that. You can go and watch the video. Because increasingly there aren't enough pilots in the aviation industry. We're going to see around an 8% increase in the number of pilots that are actually needed in the number of flights around the world. So Airbus is still being quite prudent, but ultimately they're kind of chasing the fully autonomous aircraft dream. You know, getting it regulated, getting it approved, getting it into production, getting it commercialized, etc., is going to be a whole other thing, but there we go. And then when we actually have a look at, again, cyber, I'm quite interested in what the hackers and criminals are actually up to. We saw this. Now, we've only ever seen one other example of malware or remote access Trojans bricking hardware. Now, what I mean by bricking hardware is if your computer today gets infected by malware, it's a hassle. You try to remove it, but if you can't remove it, you basically wipe your computer, you reset it to its factory settings, start it up and go, bugger, I lost all my data, I lost all my preferences, I lost my browser history, bugger. But fundamentally, your computer comes back up, right? You can use it, reinstall programs, etc., etc. This is the second time that I've seen malware being used at relatively decent global scale to completely brick hardware, to the point where the only thing you can do with these modems is to put them in the bin. The other company that we saw having its hardware bricked was Barracuda and its email gateways. So this is sort of more interesting than you might think, because from a cybersecurity perspective, what happens if you are, for example, the Saudi government, and you are investing $500 billion building out the line, which was 170 kilometers long, but is now 2.4 kilometers long by 2030, different conversation. And all of a sudden, I'm able to actually use remote access Trojans and malware to brick all of the hardware in your multi-billion-dollar smart city. How do you remove all that hardware for a start? So this is actually a much more pivotal cybersecurity story than it sounds. Excuse me. And then on the future of transportation, obviously there are a lot of organizations and countries and governments basically that want to remove really trucks basically from highways. They want to reduce the amount of traffic, to reduce the amount of emissions and so on and so forth. But also a lot of traffic around the world is actually gridlocked, which affects a country's GDP, prosperity and productivity. So while we've got hyperloops that have been trialed by DP World, for example, basically in the UAE with some of the ports, Japan is kind of taking a different tack on trying to move giant cargo containers around the country by building a 310 kilometer long underground conveyor belt system. Now this actually has parallels with the Swiss Südterrain, which is a £3.8 billion Swiss project, which is very, very similar. Dig a load of tunnels, basically stick some conveyor belts in there, and then you move all the cargo and stuff underground, under cities as well. And then sort of bringing it back to Airbus. Airbus had a successful test of its first hydrogen fuel cell engines a little while ago, and they are now starting to put those hydrogen fuel cell engines basically into their A380-0E demonstrator. Now, when you actually have a look at the competition between Airbus and Boeing, I have to say, Airbus actually are experimenting with quite a lot of things. They are pushing the boundaries on quite a lot of things. They do seem to have their eye very much fixed on the future, even though they're a big behemoth to try and turn around, whereas Boeing seem to be stuck. So Airbus at the moment actually has twice the amount of orders as Boeing. I mean, obviously we know Boeing's had its issues, but if Airbus are able to create the first zero emissions aircraft soon, and this is sort of really, they've got production plans for 2035 at the moment that could bring that forward, then it might actually absolutely cement them as the world's largest commercial aircraft builder, which means basically their stock will go up like crazy. But don't buy that, because I'm not a financial consultant. However, I do know an artificial intelligence that is happy to advise you on anything and everything that you'd actually like to be advised on. And that is it. So what was that? So that was 11 days worth of breaking and innovative science and technology news from the Fanatical Futurists blog, the Exponents blog there. Now, if you're interested in other things, basically I've got some books. So I've got 15,000 pages worth of futures content, basically, that you can mooch through. It is all free. Somewhere, basically, there's a YouTube channel up there. And actually, if you're watching this, you're probably already on the YouTube channel. So like, subscribe, do all the things, basically, that the teenagers tell you to do. And I will hopefully be back next week with some more news, because there is always news. The question then becomes just how interesting and how impactful is it? So thank you for watching. Take care and goodbye.